Okay. Good day. Welcome to Talking Smart Conversations with colleagues in education and philosophy from around the world. My guest today is Félix Garcia Moriyon. If I said that correctly, you can correct me.
More or less.
My Spanish is bad or non-existent. Anyway, it's just a great pleasure to have Félix with us today. He has been involved with philosophy for children and teaching philosophy for many years, beginning with teaching high school philosophy for 35 years. He is an honorary professor in the Department of Specific Didactics at the University of Madrid. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, good. And founder of the Spanish Society for Teaching Philosophy in 1980. In 1986, he got a Fulbright scholarship to study with Matt Lippman at IAPC, and has been the editor of Thinking, the Journal of Philosophy for Children, from 1986 to 2006 to 2014, and involved with SOPHIA, the European Philosophy of Children group, and among other millions of wonderful things. So thank you for agreeing to be a guest today, Félix. So
thanks a lot for the invitation.
Now,
I try to do my best. My English is not good enough.
That won't be a problem, I'm sure. Anyway, this has been a series of now, I think, 4 interviews that I've done. I guess I really have tried to make this a broad field. So when I talk about education and philosophy, I picked those 2 areas because I think between the 2 of them, they cover almost everything that I'm possibly interested in. And so, and I know you have a wide-ranging interest as well. And if I remember correctly, the reason 2 reasons, but one of the reasons when I initially asked, I said, maybe we could talk a little bit about philosophy for children and philosophy in general around issues of anarchy as well, because if I remember correctly, and maybe this is not an accurate memory, but at Graz, at the conference, ICFIC conference in Graz, we talked shortly about anarchy and philosophy, and I've been fascinated with Peter Kropotkin for a long time. And you sent me, I think, 2 books that you had written in Spanish. Unfortunately, I'd never got past the first couple of pages that I could translate myself. So but I've been interested in that idea. But I think what I'm interested in talking about is just the confluence of ideas that flows around philosophy for children, and anarchy among other political ideas, and how those things intertwined and are maybe ferreted out as we work through our way through philosophy and education. So any opening comments on that, and then we can just see how it goes from there.
Well, first, I don't know. I am a son of a teacher, a grandson of a teacher, a brother of a teacher, uncle of a teacher. My family is a family full of teachers, education for many, many years. So I have a specific interest in education. The second one is that when I was young, 20 years old, and you start looking for any specific political ideas to become involved in the political situation in your country. At that time in Spain was Franco dictatorship. When I was young, I lived till 25 years under the dictatorship, Franco dictatorship. So when I was 20, I started becoming involved in political intervention. I discovered that the political philosophy that I more with my own personal way of looking at the life was anarchism. two reasons. First, the strong sense of freedom. We are not born to be under the knees. We are to be up and asking for respect. And the second one was come from Kropotkin's, the mutual aids.
Yes.
Mutual aids are the main factor of evolution. So I thought that anarchism was the political philosophy I must close to me, and I became involved in different anarchist organizations, mainly first different political organization because it was still Franco dictatorship, and it was impossible to openly belong to any anarchist association. But after Franco's death, I moved to mainly to small leftist parties, very small, mixed anarchists and mixed Marxists. But for me, the most important thing was anarchist. And I decided to move to anarchism. As a matter of fact, at that time I was finishing my studies in philosophy, and my doctoral thesis was about the Spanish anarchist thinking. It's a very big doctoral thesis, 685 pages, big stuff, no? And then I moved to trade unions, anarchist trade unions. I don't know, you know that in Spain, anarchism is a very old tradition.
Yes.
Before the Civil War, probably anarchists, the trade union of anarchists was the biggest anarchist trade union in Spain. And it was very, very important during the war, but then it was destroyed, killed, not destroyed. But after the Franco dictatorship, again, anarchism was very active in Spain. And then since 1984, I became member of the CNT first, then CGT, and involved in this trade union, working in mainly in education, of course.
Well, it's interesting that history is interesting and helpful. Your personal involvement in that is not unparalleled with sort of my involvement in politics. We, of course, Wisconsin in the United States is much more, I don't know, within a two-party system, but within that whole system, there's always been a really a Deweyan connection to a lot of this and stuff. And when the civil rights movement was beginning in the United States, sort of toward the end of that period, I went off to Washington, D.C. as a part of a group that was actually first heading for Selma, Alabama, for the march on from Selma to Montgomery to get for voter rights. This was the second attempt at that. The first attempt was a disaster with a lot of people being killed. And so they had another call to make that march. And I got hooked up with a group of people that ended up going on that march, or at least that's where we were heading. We were heading for Selma. There were 3 bus loads of us went from Wisconsin. And on the bus, we voted because there were people from the Martin Luther King's group and also the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Martin Luther King wanted more people to come. Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee said, no, it's going to be too much violence. We don't want to have any violence. We're much more peaceful in terms of this. And so we decided on the bus that I think 2 buses went to Selma, and the bus that I was on decided that Washington was what we wanted to do, because we originally went with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Anyway, that's just that. But what I wanted to make a point about that was one of the key things was all the people that organized this believed in what they called participatory democracy. And that meant that everybody should participate. Leadership was flexible, and we decided about things as a group. And so that's kind of the connection that I sort of personally have with, I think, from what I'm understanding, is kind of your personal perspective on anarchy as well. It's kind of that role of individuality in politics, but how that works together with mutual aid. Is that a reasonable connection that I'm making between our two very diverse paths?
Yeah, they are diverse because we are living in different circumstances. So,
Yes, yeah.
as you know, Franco dictatorship was very, very hard at the beginning. They really killed a lot of people. But when I was young, well, it was a dictatorship. Some students were killed in the university, but it was not the terrorific dictatorship at the beginning. And in this sense, we didn't have any specific violent demonstration in any moment. Only in Spain, at that moment, the violence was used by the separatist people in the Basque Country, mainly in the Basque Country, and they killed a lot of people, around 1,000 people. They killed, but not in the rest of Spain. Nobody wanted to fight. Nobody wanted to use violence. Although in Spain, the anarchist organization in the 20s and the 30s of the 19th century used violence many, many, many times.
Oh, yes.
It was a question also of life or death. You have to fight. That was it. But in any case, for me, an anecdote, when I went to Montclair, I discovered that the people around Matthew Lipman were much more progressive than most of the people I met in Spain in the university. It was a very small group, but very radical people in the sense of democracy you were pointing out earlier. Direct democracy, participation, taking control, all this kind of stuff. And I feel very comfortable. And even I talk with Matthew Lipman sometimes about this topic, and he admits that he have a kind of sympathy or inclination to anarchist people with anarchist education. For example, one of his model of education was Yasnaya Poliana. That is the school founded by Tolstoy, an anarchist school. And I remember one time that Matthew Lipman came to Spain, I was talking with him that I decided to create a model of education for the people involved in our trade unions, and I was using the Philosopher Children model to educate all those people. He was very, very he thought that was magnificent idea. He liked it very much.
Yes, and you know, it's kind of interesting. I found the same experience going to study with Lipman. I did one of those 3-week trainings in the Poconos before they did training in other places. But anyway, what impressed me so much was because the educational reform was something I sort of grew up with in my teacher education, and that kind of sense of openness. But what I never had in my teacher education was a sense of grounding that philosophically. And so I had the kind of the democratic part of it, but I didn't have the philosophical part of the education. And so for me, Lipman put those two things together, the educational innovations and the democratic nature and the philosophical grounding of that democratic nature. So that's my entree into that and that connection. And Dewey, I think maybe for both of us kind of provides some kind of interesting center for that. I shouldn't make a judgment about your relationship to John Dewey. Has it been important in your?
Yes, it's very important because first I discovered when I was there, the first thing I discovered that I pronounced Dewey, and it's Dewey. It's funny. I enter in a bookstore and ask for a book of Dewey that way, and nobody understand anything. And then I discovered it's Dewey, not Dewey. That's a funny story. No, but I discovered Dewey because for Spanish philosophy, Dewey was one example of the pragmatist, American pragmatist that is not philosophical at all.
Ah,
This is the kind of what I studied in my university. The USA philosophy is not serious philosophy. Serious philosophy is German, French.
Yeah.
That is the stuff. And this is pragmatic, capitalism in the philosophy, silly things. Anyway, then I discovered Dewey at that time. And I started reading Dewey. I have read not a lot, but many things from Dewey. And I think that this is one of the philosophers at this moment that I respect the more, because the whole idea of moral education, political participation, freedom, all this kind of stuff for me is almost the best way of approaching these topics. And then I keep working with Dewey. I always talk about Dewey, always, any times that is needed, mainly because I work a lot in moral education. And the whole idea of Dewey of creating intelligent habits, transforming your habits, virtues. This kind of approach to ethics for me is very interesting, and I really love. Just another talk this morning. I am the coordinator of the small journal from my trade union in education, and I proposed then to publish an article by Dewey, a short article by Dewey. I said, look, this is a classic philosopher, very important in the new education in the 19th century and 20th century, and very close to anarchist ideas. Was not an anarchist, very close. And more they read the paper, probably I will publish it in our journal, no? Because it's familiar. It belongs not directly to the anarchism, but it's another in another way a tradition in the state. But one of the person I translated and wrote a short introduction was David Thoreau.
Yes.
It's very important also for anarchist people. And his book was for me also very important. And also, well, let me see, Goldman. This women, a very important also anarchist thinker. So, and even a peculiar anarchist person, Doris Day, no, you hear?
Oh, yes.
No, that's in the process of beatification in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Because she was a Catholic, and she was an anarchist, like me. I am a Catholic and also an anarchist.
Yes.
Doris Day is wonderful also. So I discovered in the state the long tradition of American philosophy. I enjoy with that, and I keep a lot of learning from them.
Yes, well, it's interesting because I have been drawn to readings that I didn't know were anarchist readings, and then until you get into the footnotes, and among those people was the French anarchist Jacques Ellul, and I think he falls into that, both being, I don't know, Catholic, but Christian and
Christian, of course.
And Paul Goodman was another one way in the 1950s that I read, and he has a lot of Deweyan stuff, and Community of Scholars is one of his books that Goodman wrote, along with Compulsory Miseducation. And
yeah, I read also that book when I was a very young person.
Yes.
I enjoy very much with the reading.
Yeah, and so those, and then here, I was just at a conference in Chicago, and I bought a new book, which is called
Ivan Illich.
50 Years Since Deschooling Society. And Deschooling Society was one of, and again, I think Deschooling Society was, and Goodman too, much more radical than Lippmann, but also an important connections between those ideas and Lippmann's ideas about how to do education and philosophy for children. So,
as you know, I wrote, yes, I have published at least 2 articles about anarchism and philosophy for children and teaching in English. And as you know, why anarchism for me is so interesting? Then because when they approach education, formal education, of course they accept, I accept that at the end, formal compulsory education is like Foucault say, dispositivo de control, a control disposition to be sure that people obey. I remember that's I think I have wrote a book that the title was El Troquel de las Conciencias. That means that the formal school system is a place where people enter and go out, all of them well quadriculated, well shaped, no? And then for anarchist people, you have 3 possibilities, and it's the same with philosopher children. For all of us, we practice in our classroom philosophy for children, and try to transform the classroom into the communities of inquiry, philosophical inquiry. We have the first possibility, anarchist, is to create your own schools. And they create a lot of schools in France, in Spain, anarchist schools.
yes.
Some of them a little authoritarian because they want to convert all the children into anarchists. And this is not an anarchist approach to education from my point of view, but very, very interesting process. In Spain was very famous, Ferrer Guardia, but other people. That's one possibility. The second possibility is to the schooling, not attending the school at all. I know that in the States, there is a movement of people who don't attend the school.
Yes, yes.
And it's not very big, but it's meaningful. And in Spain, it's very small. But this is an idea. I am not taking my children to the school system, and I keep schooling them, educating them at home, and with a close circle of people. This is the second one, the schooling, no? And in Spain, it's not legal, it's not illegal, it's in the middle, you know? Some people do that. I know I have some friends, other people know. And the third one is the only one for me in this moment that is interesting is when you are a teacher in the public school, in Spain, the name is funcionario del Estado, a state worker. You obey to the state because you are working for the state. Then even if you do that, at this moment, at least in the theoretical approach to education, at least in Spain, but also in international organizations like ODCE, no? ODCE, the economical organization. The main ideas are more or less similar, teaching children to think for themselves, teaching them for being cooperative, teaching them to be democratic. All this kind of stuff is official. But then when you go to the school, the banking school system, filling my children with a lot of content without any critical thinking is very frequent. But at this moment, in the official system, you have the right as a teacher to transform your classroom into a community of inquiry. I have said sometimes that the best way of following some of the wonderful ideas of this UNESCO and TCOD, all this is to practice the community of philosophical inquiry.
Yes.
Because it's the place where children learn to think for themselves, to think talking with other people, to deliberate in a creative sense, not in a destructive sense. It's not winning the contest, but just trying to start thinking and recognize that other people don't agree with you. It doesn't matter. There is room for everybody.
Yes. Well, well, that conference I was at in Chicago is American Educational Research Association, and one of the special interest groups that was there, and I attended several of the sessions, was on Paulo Freire, and interestingly, talking about the state school, the people working for the state. In individual states that is a part of the official thing, but in some states, like particularly Florida now and Texas, one of the professors that was at the conference taught at the University of Texas, and he said that there's a law that's being considered right now that if you taught critical theory or critical race theory in any university class, you could be fired and lose your tenure. And
right? It's so.
Yes, and that has not passed, but it was a very big concern. And he said, I think the only thing that we can do is call a general strike. And so that was the most radical response to that I heard. I mean, and it was and there were other people, and another woman in particular in that small group that said, "Whoa, we're doing the same thing as happening in Florida. The governor of Florida thinks that he is in charge of education, that he is the state, and people will teach what he wants them to teach." And so we have.
That is not the case in Spain. We are lucky now. That is not the case.
Yeah.
And even the theory of the general laws of education is in favor of philosopher-centered approach.
Yes.
Because as you know, almost all the good tendencies in education, in philosophy education, in practical education, all of them goes around these ideas of cooperative learning, critical thinking, democracy, complexity, open discussion, almost all. So even if I work for the state, and it's funny, an anarchist working for the state is a little funny, no? But in the case of Spain at this moment, of course, you can teach as you want, because you have the right to adapt the main directives of the Ministry of Education to your specific classroom. You are not only the right, you has also the duty of adapting the principles to a specific group of students. And some students, as you know, every group is different to the other group in the class around there. No? So in Spain, we are finding this, we are lucky in this sense, because at this moment, the open-minded of in the realities is very big. You can teach whatever you want to teach, unless you make mistake, but related with mistreatment of students, things like that, but not the teaching, Right now, the right in Spain is fighting because they talk about the gender ideology.
Oh, yes.
And they say that the government at this moment is the left, with a precision is the left, anyway. Have the the Ministry of Women Equality is a woman, and there are the ministries. There are as many women in the government as men, and some of the women as radicals in the good sense of the word, and they are moving to the gender equality, all this kind of stuff, you know. And then the conservative people is fighting as much as they can, but nobody pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Only, of course, I suppose in some Catholic schools or conservative school will try to use this situation to say in their classroom that gender ideology is terrible, is bad people, evil people, all these things. But the rest, no. The open-minded people at this moment is the dominant tendency officially.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, I try to keep up as much as I can with European politics, but it is a major intellectual effort in the United States to keep up with European politics because we have such poor international coverage of news.
Yeah.
Sometimes you would think that nothing happens outside of the United States. It's so, I mean, and that's, I mean, and it's not just politics and government issues, but even entertainment and you know, it was you sent that nice connection to Joan Baez and the Argentine folk singer that I listened to, and Rita and I listened to with great pleasure. But the fact that there is a brilliant Argentine singer who's singing with Joan Baez does not even make the cultural news in the United States.
Yeah.
And it's just discouraging, because I think sometimes we live in such a bubble that we have no idea that there is even another country. We might recognize Canada, but we reluctantly recognize Mexico, who is just as close to us as anybody. But anyway, that's a whole nother story.
I had some experience in my 10 months in the States. And one thing I discovered, sometimes I have problem, a small problem with police or with my the woman who rented us our room, and then when I remember the police stopped me because it's a small infraction. I don't know the problem was. Well, anyway, they started me a little ugly, you know. And then I say, well, I'm Spanish from Europe, Spain. They change their mind. They start talking me in a different way, you know. It's funny. Yes, because of course the relationship between the Mexican and the States and the Mexican people, or the people from Rio Grande till the south. I remember discussing in the States about the continents, and one talked the North America and said, well, Mexico is North America. No. Mexico is South America. No, my God. Mexico is North America. Please look. Look.
Yes. I know. Well, that's part of the reason why we did, you know, our North American group. We have the North American Association for Community of Inquiry, which I've been involved with for many years. And even that, you know, we made a special effort to say at least North America is Mexico, Canada, and the United States. It's not it's not the United States, or it's not Canada. It's Mexico is north of the equator, for gosh sakes.
Well, but you know, it's funny also in Spain, because in Spain the official name is Ibero-America.
Oh, yes,
Ibero-America.
yes.
It's never Latin America. It's Ibero-America. That is the
Yes.
America we was conquered, culturalized by the peninsula, Iberic Peninsula, Portuguese and Spanish. This is the Ibero-American community. And it's funny because in Spain they say, well, Spain and the Ibero community, please, Spain is part of the America. You can't say the Ibero-American community and Spain, because Spain is part. Spain is in a country Ibero-American. Ibero-American. This is the country, Ibero-American, our country. No, no, them. They don't understand it. Well, this is in this sense, I don't like very much the colonizing idea, this kind of identity tendencies mixes with wokeness and things like that. But of course, the neo-colonialism is still very, very alive.
Yes, yes.
Very alive.
Well, I'm trying to keep these to somewhere around a half hour, and so maybe we can just. It's interesting. I think we have touched on many of the things that I thought. I hope the direction would go in, and the integration of philosophy and linguistics and philosophy for children, education. All of these things are interconnected, and so maybe if you want to do a little bit of a summary statement about how these things are connected, and we can use that as the ending of our interview.
Well, I will share with you another personal anecdote. When
Yes.
I came back from the States, I was a man from the left and working for the left, presenting an American thinker to the left people, it was very difficult. I had problem with that because nobody in the philosophy were hear nothing about an American philosophy. On the other side, I didn't like the idea of me being the person who dedicates to import to Spain a educational proposal from the state. Although I really like it. I start disseminating the philosophy for children program right after coming to Spain. But I attended a conference, an epic conference, I don't know, it was the second or the third, in Maringá, Brazil. Very few people. I think we are 20 people, no more than that. Lawrence, for example, I remember, Catherine Silva, Matthew Lindman. And it was there when I discovered that philosophy for children was much more than the last discovery from a Ibero-American philosopher. It was a real proposal that people from Brazil, coming from the Paulo Freire tradition, discover a way to fight for education for the people and in favor of the people. Then I came back to Spain and I decided to become involved seriously in the promotion and information in philosophy of children, because I thought that it was a real proposal to try to transform the world and ourselves in a better place to live in.
Okay, well, I am going to now officially end the recording so that I can make sure that I save this, but we can chat for a minute or so after that. Okay.